Krishna Krishna Mukunda Janardana,
Krishna Krishna Mukunda Janardana,
Krishna Govinda Narayana Hare,
Govinda Narayana Hare,
Krishna Krishna Govinda Narayana Hare,
Govinda Narayana Hare,
Achyutananda Govinda Madhava,
Achyutananda Govinda Madhava,
Achyutananda Govinda Madhava,
Achyutananda Govinda Madhava,
Sachidananda Narayana Hare,
Sachidananda Narayana Hare,
Sachidananda Narayana Hare,
Sachidananda Narayana Hare,
Krishna Krishna Mukunda Janardana,
Krishna Krishna Mukunda Janardana,
Krishna Krishna Mukunda Janardana,
Krishna Krishna Mukunda Janardana,
Krishna Govinda Narayana Hare,
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 Krishna Govinda Narayana
Hare. Shri Krishna Chandra Bhagavan ki jai. Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Ram. Loudly. Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Ram.
Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Ram.
Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Ram. Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Ram.
Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Ram.
Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Ram.
Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Ram.
Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Ram.
Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Ram.
Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Ram.
Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Ram.
Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Ram.
Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Ram.
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 प्रिय सियावर रामचंद्र की
जय।
पवन सुत हनुमान की
जय।
बोलो भाई सब संतन की
जय।
सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की
जय।
Hari Om everyone. Hope and pray that all of you are doing well. And there are certain sessions that we were conducting during the year which were not aired format of Devi group. But this particular Devi group we will continue. Even if you're traveling and cannot attend on the main Zoom discussion, you can always watch it on the YouTube. Leave me a message in the group if you're traveling and you need this link to be posted into the group. That can also be done. That can also be arranged. But wherever you're going, be safe, be cautious, and come back healthy. That is the request and prayer. So we will start with the invocation, then Hari Chaitanya will lead and repeat, then Divya, Brahmacharini Divya will put her viewpoint, then Brahmachari Hari Chaitanya will put his, then I'll consolidate the thought at the end. Today, if I am not wrong, it is 39 and 40th, I think. Yeah. So we will begin now. सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुरेव परं ब्रह्मा तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। Take care everyone. Sorry, I thought I said Purnamadaha. Sorry. Hari Garu, let me just put you on the shared spotlight. वाह, एक क्या गलती हो गया, सारे सारे दांत दिखने लग गए। थैंक यू।
तपोभिक्षीणपापानां शान्तानां वीतरागिणां मुमुक्षूणामपेक्ष्योऽयम् आत्मबोधो विधीयते। 39. ātmanyevākhilaṃ dṛśyaṃ
ātmanyevākhilaṃ dṛśyaṃ
pravilāpya dhiyā sudhīḥ
pravilāpya dhiyā sudhīḥ
bhāvayedekamātmānaṃ
bhāvayedekamātmānaṃ
nirmalākāśavatsadā
nirmalākāśavatsadā
rūpavarṇādikaṃ sarvaṃ
rūpavarṇādikaṃ sarvaṃ
vihāya paramārthavit
vihāya paramārthavit
paripūrṇacidānandasvarūpeṇāvatiṣṭhate
paripūrṇacidānandasvarūpeṇāvatiṣṭhate. Thank you, Harigaru. Let me put. There you go.
Hariam.
We can hear you.
So in the last verse, we began the art of contemplation. And it started with the idea that we need to develop the vasana of Brahma eva asmi. And the practice began from out going inwards. So we started with be seated in a solitary place, free the mind of any desires and its tendency to run out through the sense organs, and have an unwavering attention on the boundless self, anantam atma. So in these two verses, there are some ideas in the previous verses that are expounded on this verse. Specifically in 39, we're going to focus on the controlling of the senses, right? Using the objects to see the seen world, using the senses to see the seen world, and withdrawing from all of the desires that may erupt in the mind. So those are the two ideas in the previous verse that will be expanded on in verse 39. So I guess the Anvaya would begin with sudhīḥ dhiyā pravilāpya dṛśyaṃ akhilam atmani eva. So the wise one, by the intellect or using the intellect, dissolves and merges the entire seen world in the Atman alone. Bhāvayedekamātmānaṃ nirmalākāśavatsadā. So once the negation and dissolving has happened, where does the attention go to? That one should always think of the ekam atma, the one Atman, and the analogy again is brought back, nirmala akashavat, like that pure space. So when we think of dṛśya, akhilam dṛśyaṃ, this is our current experience, that we only recognize things from the seer through the organs of perception to the object itself and illuminate and become conscious of it. This is the only pathway we know of being conscious. And so we are taught to reverse this and to instead focus more and more on the seer instead of the seen, and come to understand what is the nature of the seer itself. That not only have you removed the subject, verb, and object, but you've come to the very existent state of consciousness itself. So it is completely uprooting and dissolving our current way of understanding, which is why that word of I think I pronounced it wrong. Pravilāpya. So I apologize. I think I pronounced that word incorrectly. So it's to merge that. And what's important here is the means to do this reversal process is with the intellect itself. And if you look at the word to describe the wise one, it's sudhīḥ. Di is the root word to represent the intelligence, that consciousness, that factor in itself. So this is a very important emphasis being made between these two words, that when we sit down for meditation, it is not a no mind state. It is not annihilating the mind altogether and discarding it, because I can easily do that in deep sleep, right? Here, we're using the intellect to negate the seen world, come back to and contemplate on the very nature of Atman with the intellect, until the point that the intellect is at the very pinnacle, is dissolved into that awareness state. So we don't come to this no mind state or the state of nothingness. That is not the definition of meditation and the understanding of that enlightenment that we're speaking of. So when it comes to this mind, how should it be? What is this wise person, sudhīḥ? They have come to purify and quieten the intellect, meaning there are no agitations whatsoever. And that comes from reducing the vasanas. And how do we reduce the vasanas? Again, we come back to the beginning of karma, bhakti, and shravana and manana. All of these preparation steps are to make the mind and intellect pure. It is with this qualification that someone can sit on the seat of contemplation to practice what is being described in the previous verses and the verses coming up. This is key. Purify the mind, and with that purified mind, we reach the highest. So when the verse now says, bhāvayedekamātmānaṃ, it is to, again, constantly focus on what is the nature and essence of this self. And again, I have to remind, even in Gurudev's video, he said, what was the 3 verses that we have to memorize? What was the 3 verses? 34 through 36 are the list of qualities. What is the nature of Atma? And here the verse specifically takes up nirmalākāśavatsadā. So Gurudev kind of went through this exercise of thinking, okay, Akash, what do I know about Akash, right? Well, literally in science, I was taught the outer, upper atmosphere, stratosphere, the thinness of the air, barely any particles in there. But even there's still substance within that upper stratosphere. So we go up even higher. We go up to the outer space. Still have sun, moon, stars, like asteroids, whatever there is. There's still stuff there. We go even higher and think about the vacuum space, that pure space, the expanse of the space, the nature of the space, the unlimited, unbound oneness that is there. That is the analogy and example that we use to, again, dissolve all the things that are not space and focus on the nature of space. This is, again, an aid to go back to those verses when we say Sat, the existence principle, where and how is existence existing, and what is the nature of existence? Awareness, consciousness, to be conscious without an instrument, with no separation of seer, seeing, and seen. What is that nature of awareness? Ananda. Ananda again comes with an unconditioned, unaided bliss, that I don't feel happy because of something. I am happiness itself. All of those things, we have to continually remove our current understanding and move our way to the outer space and come to the nature of self. And the last word that's given is sada. At first, I was wondering if sada belongs with always contemplating bhāvayed, or is sada the nature of Atman, that it is always has this nature. Gurudev puts it at the end, saying that this kind of contemplation is not something where I have to sit in my seat of meditation and be there 24 hours and forget the whole world. So sada with constantly contemplating doesn't necessarily have the impact that the verse is trying to say. Sada is that because this nature of pureness is its very own swarupa, it is always like this, and it is that constantness that I'm reaching towards. So sada belongs with the nature of Atma. And that is a state that I want to reach by constantly contemplating on it. So sada was an interesting word that it caught my attention. So with the next verse is paramārthavit vihāya sarvaṃ rūpavarṇādikaṃ. So we saw dṛśyaṃ akhilaṃ. So now we're giving it more qualities, that it's rūpavarṇādi. Again, we're going back to that senses, right? Every piece of information that I can possibly know right now has come through my senses. It is a form of sight, sound, taste, smell, touch. I have no other pieces of information. And so Rupa and Varna are both associated with the sense organ of eyes. Adi reference to all other sense organs. So any piece of information, all of that has to be vihāya, discarded. Meaning it has no reality when I'm trying to understand the reality of this nature. So the example that Gurudev takes in describing this vihāya is, when you are in the process of going to sleep, you disregard the sounds, the sights, the smells, and the tastes. Slowly you disregard all of that until you come to attempt to sleep, to becoming the sleeper and have slept off, right? So that process of withdrawing from the senses, I think, is given well in that example. So now again, he gives another description of who is doing this process. Paramārthavit. Parama is supreme. Artha is meaning. So vit is someone who has the knowledge of this supreme meaning. It's really wonderful to see how Sanskritam is able to add so many layers of understanding within one word. That this is the meaning of life, that this is the secret of existence itself. The one who knows this is the one who is attempting this contemplation and meditation process. So he has left all perceptions of all objects. And where is his attention? Paripūrṇacidānandasvarūpeṇāvatiṣṭhate. So when we sit down and I say, if I'm not feeling anything, if I'm not perceiving anything, if I'm not thinking, then what am I doing? Again, this is not self-annihilation or self-destruction, right? What's really interesting is there was a movie that I had once seen where the plot line was that the entire world has contracted some sort of weird sickness where every once in a while, one sense goes. So the entire world, their eyes go. Then a few months later, the entire world, their sense of smell and taste go. So it was really interesting. What do the restaurants do now? They start to focus on the form of the food, right? I mean, I think the order was kind of different, but they start to get into the texture of like, how does the food feel? How does it look? What are the colors? So they start adapting every few months based on the sense that goes. The very last scene, all the senses are gone and it just flips to the black screen with absolute silence. Again, that last part is what's misleading. We don't come to nothingness again. We don't come to blackness or silence. Instead, we are coming to paripūrṇa, that awareness, bliss, that is absolutely complete in whatever direction you're trying to approach this swarupa of Atma. So it is again this consciousness bliss that we have to contemplate on all the time. And at the very brink, you're contemplating, trying to think and be this Atman. But at some point, all of it is dropped. Even the aham in aham brahmasmi is dropped. There is no you and the contemplated upon. You merge into being that contemplated state because the essence of who you are, the essence of what you are contemplating on is one and the same. Just as how the identity of the river, as it's approaching the ocean, eventually drops its identity. You can't even say, where is Ganga in Sagar? So this is the very nuanced, subtle approach of using my mind to dissolve the mind into the awareness and not a no mind state to come to a nothingness. So this is very important nuance of meditation in these two verses, and it will continue in the next couple. Swamiji, that is all I have.
Thank you, Divya. Hari Garu.
There you go. Hari everyone. So again, we go further in this discussion of meditation, fully understanding in these two shlokas here that what is that jnani, what is the process that he gets to understand what his true nature is, and what is to be expected after that then. So starting off here, we find that the wise man should intelligently merge the entire world of objects in the Atman alone. Merging here is very interesting. The word is pravilāpya then. But there has to be a step before that, because what merging in the Atman means is to see all of these things as unreal. And by these things, we mean that world of names and forms and those objects that I run after, thinking that they give me happiness. But before this pravilāpya can happen, vivicya has to happen. That's that separation, not seeing it anymore, that what I identify with this gross body, this mental, the mind, which is the flow of thoughts and seat of emotions, this intellect with so much indecision, clarity, all these different thoughts, understanding that no matter how real all of these objects seem to me, no matter how attached I am to give them results of what I want, all of them are unreal, and intellectually going through the process through mananam of disassociating with those through logic and reasoning. When that vivicya is done, that separation from all of these things, then that merging in the Atman can happen. Because their source of all of these objects in the world, the source can be nothing but that which is a permanent substratum. If these are fleeting and they have an expiration date, a beginning and an end, whether it's an object that's anything made of these five elements, whether it's a phone in front of you made of plastic and other materials, whether it's this very human body itself, everything has an expiration date and a birth date to it. Therefore, it must be fleeting. Therefore, it must end at some time. So the only source it can go to that permanent is ekam sat, the substratum of everything, and that's that merging, understanding that's where it goes. So there's no physical merging going on here. Again, it's an understanding that takes place. And then we see that they must constantly think of that self as if it is that ever uncontaminated space. Bhāvayedekamātmānaṃ nirmalākāśavatsadā, just as that uncontaminated space. Now, why is the example of space used here? Because if we look at Bhagavan Sri Adi Śaṅkarācarya's work, many examples are repeated in certain contexts. And the brilliance that we find is whatever the context is, the broad context that's there, he inserts that perfect example here. So the context we have here is these objects, even after I've seen them as unreal, and that merging process into Atman has happened, I still have to constantly think of it as uncontaminated space, because just as space is there, not affected by anything, all the other objects of the world, they still affect all the other elements. The restaurant example was given, that's still stuck in my mind now. You go to a restaurant, food, every one of your senses, it has to draw in. That's why they say food is the greatest art form in the world, because anything like dance or music, only one one sense is drawn in. Food, all of them have to be. Something that your mom can tell you this tastes great, just try it. But if it smells bad or looks very odd, you'll be very reluctant to eat it, very reluctant to put it in your mouth. Therefore, all 5 senses have to be drawn. Despite that, when an object like food is drawing in the 5 senses, space is still that one element that's completely uncontaminated. There is no way that any kind of a smell, any kind of a form, nothing can touch that space, manipulate it in any single way. Like that, then, when the objects of the world, the one I'm dealing with the most often, this BMI, though it's still functioning, though it still may give me responses in the form of physical problems, mental turmoil, intellectual non-understanding, whatever it gives me, all of that is still unreal. Whatever that substratum is, that true identity I have, cannot be affected at all. So focusing on the only one thing, that one element that is unaffected, thinking of myself as that space, doing that upasana constantly, remembrance of that constantly, that's what really has that conviction for me. That's why that example is given here. Now, as we look in the next shloka, rūpavarṇādikaṃ sarvaṃ vihāya, that he discards everything with objects of names and forms. Now, the maturity of a sadhaka comes in operating from the right standpoint at the right time. Meaning, when what the concept to be understood is you are that reality, which is the nature of existence, consciousness, bliss. You can't be anything but that. At that moment, if my objection is, oh, but I feel happy at times and I feel sad at times, how can I be the nature of unmitigated bliss? I'm looking at it from the wrong standpoint there. What Shastra is telling me is from a completely different plane. At the same time, if my mind has to be fine-tuned, mind has to be cleansed, and I say, oh, the objects the mind deals with, this mind itself is unreal, why even focus on cleansing it? Again, I'm looking at it from the wrong standpoint as a sadhaka, and that will doom me. That misunderstanding will come up. Because names and forms then cannot be discarded if I have not understood their importance at the vyavaharic transactional plane. At the transactional plane, names and forms are purposefully there for me to use to make my life more efficient so that I can be a better sadhaka. For the most basic things, we're meeting on Zoom right now. Oftentimes, if you're using some iPhone device, iPhone 420, something like that, you won't be let into the class. Because you have to have the right name so that we recognize it, that's when you come in. We had a summer camp for the first time 2 years ago. The first year we were in the pandemic, right? And at that time, Zoom bombing was a big issue. That was happening to a lot of organizations, even government organizations. Top secret meetings were being Zoom bombed. It was a very scary time. So then we would have these names, rosters of first and last names, and these kids would have just one name, as if they're film stars like Dharmendra Jitendra. We have to know who they are that way by one name, like that one name, Priya, and we have to know, do we let them in or not? So we'd say, for the efficiency of this class and what we're trying to achieve here, please put your first and last name is what we tell the kids. Like that then forms being in the right form in the vyavaharic world, that is a necessity. But that maturity of a seeker comes when they understand that once the purpose has been served of the name and the form, whether it's looking at myself as a certain gender, of a certain race, of a certain creed, whatever it is, once that purpose has been served, I can't dwell on that name and form any longer, can't give it too much importance, that must be discarded as well. So when that process is understood and discarding the name and form comes at the right time, that's when I make progress as a sadhaka. Discarded too soon, there is no progress because there's lack of understanding. Discarded too late, that shows that I'm dwelling on something that's impermanent. I shouldn't be owning that up as my identity going further. Now, paramārthavit is the adjective given here, or noun actually, the one who has realized the Supreme Self. What does that mean, realize the Supreme Self? Because the last few shlokas and this one heavily deals with what meditation is, dhyāna. Where that nidhyasana is those lingering ideas that are contrary to what I have been told about what my identity is, those lingering contradictory ideas still persist. So those thoughts that I dwell on, that single pointed focus of a thought where I harp on what my true identity is, that will eradicate any last lingering vestiges of me thinking I'm this individuality. And that person at that point is that paramārthavit. Now, what becomes of them then? paripūrṇacidānandasvarūpeṇāvatiṣṭhate. They remain as an embodiment of that infinite consciousness, that unmitigated bliss. Now, in Pujya Gurudev's commentary, in the translation, as well as his written commentary, the phrase comes, becoming Atman. What does becoming Atman mean? Because when I think of becoming, something I am now, being different from it, transforming in some way is becoming. That the slug kind of thing, caterpillar, it sits in its cocoon for a little bit, emerges as that beautiful butterfly with wings. Transformation has occurred. Milk becoming curd also goes through a curdling transformation. In this situation then, if I considered that I was not Atman before and I've become that, that breaks the entire Siddhanta given in this text so far. The only explanation that can be given is my identity this whole time has been with the changing names and forms. I've let go of that at this point. I still need one identity to be with though. It can't be in no man's land. Whether it's a passport or citizenship, once you get the citizenship of a new country, you relinquish your old one. There is no position you can be in where you relinquish the citizenship of one country and you don't take another one's, where you're just not belonging to any country. It doesn't work that way. It's not convenient to be that way either. Therefore, like that, the identity has to be with something. And if we were Shunyavadins, saying that there's nothingness as a substratum, there would be no identity, but Shastra tells us that Atman is the all-pervading one. Therefore, becoming Atman means I've got rid of this identity, and whatever remains, that substratum that is everything, everything comes from it, the only permanent thing, that is that Sat Chit Ananda, that is what I am. So we don't ever see in the transactional world an example of anything going further here where knowing something means becoming that thing. I can watch a documentary and learn about a certain animal. I know about that animal, I don't become that animal at that point. Then how can we say, what example is there to show that when I know Atman, I become that Atman, quote? Where is there any evidence of that? Where Paravidya has that specialty to it. Any other type of knowledge where it's a simple knowingness in the intellect. Knowing that Atman means I have purged myself of identification with anything else. Therefore, there's no other, as we mentioned in a few verses before, there's no palavyapti needed to illuminate that thought. That brahmakara vritti is enough to illuminate it. And at that point, when all other identifications have ceased, I know that I am that Atman. So that is becoming that Atman, and knowing that Atman means I have become it as well. So then that ignorance of the veil of ignorance is lifted. That is what occurs. So that is the explanation for these two shlokas here. That's all I have, Swamiji.
Thank you, Hari. Now, what do these two shlokas talk about? In the 39th Shloka, a very important concept is being laid out. In order to understand this concept, I'll take a couple of examples. To understand what does the important word here in this shloka, pravilāpya, dhiyā, sudhīḥ. Sudhīḥ, first word. Sudhīḥ is that trained, disciplined, accessible antakarana. That is called a sudhī. Like yesterday, there was somebody who was trying to vehemently argue. I think the standpoint that only qualified should meditate should not be the case. Everybody should be allowed to meditate. So please continue. If that is what you feel comfortable with, continue. But what is the purpose of that? The purpose of it is to abide. And in that abidance, this antakarana, the subtlest of it, the intellect, has to be available. If it is constantly dragged and distracted, constantly in a whirlpool of attachments and identifications, there's no point sitting on the seat of meditation. We would be twitching all the way through, or sleeping, either or. That is what effectively the meditation will become. We will be brooding instead of meditating. Brooding over wherever we are attached, wherever we are stuck. So the sudhī is an important qualification, that it is a disciplined, accessible antakarana, that which is well prepped. Now, an individual who is a sudhī, the subject, dhiyā, in that intellect now which is accessible, in that intellect, in that understanding of the intellect, pravilāpya, layam kritva. You have to resolve. The reason I say resolve instead of dissolve is, when you say dissolve, it, yes, no more exists in that particular form, but continues to exist in different kind of, like when you take a spoon of sugar and mix it in, the sugar in that form may have disappeared, but the other attributes are still there. Resolving is not the same process. Now, what do I mean by that word resolving? Because English is not the language in which it is written. If it were in any other Bharatiya languages, probably the bhasha and paribhasha of it would have been easier. So in English, we have to now search for what would be the most appropriate word to communicate. So I would go with the word resolve. Why am I insisting upon it? Let's go through the example so that it becomes clearer for our grasp. The Upanishad says that all the ghata swarupa are nama and rupa. Mrittika eva satyam. Mrittika, the clay, is the only reality of that nama rupa. Now, if the base and the stomach of that vessel that has been created is larger, then you would call it pot. If it is thinner and longer, you would call it a vase. If it is flatter, you would call it a platter or a plate or a whatever it is used for. If it is smaller, that flat surface, you would call it a saucer. Hyderabadi people are known to enjoy that saucer wherein you pour the chai into it and then slurp it in. So these are all several kinds of names and forms. But in and through all these names and forms, what exactly is the reality of it? The reality of it is mrittika eva satyam. Mrittika, the clay, is satyam. Now, in order to understand that all of these forms are made up of clay alone, I don't need to break the pot. I just have to break the conceptualization of my intellect as it is viewing it. So I break it in my understanding. What am I breaking? The name and the form. The name and the form is resolved into clay. The moment we understand, oh, all of these are nothing but clay. The moment that understanding dawns upon, the clarity is set in, then all the names and forms are resolved into clay. When I say resolved, it has always been clay. In whichever name or form, prior to this name and form, it was clay. After it breaks, also it still remains to be clay. To understand that baseline of substratum is called resolution. Right? Now, I'll try the same thing with another example. So if you have ever been to a vacation in Hawaii, I am told, never been, so I am told it is the surfer's paradise or a nightmare, as the case may be. Because the waves are pretty challenging there. Pretty challenging, wherein the waves can rise up almost about 8 to 12 feet. Where it curls into tunnels of waves. And if you get caught in it, you are slammed straight into the bed of the sea. It's very rocky, choppy ocean that is. So there is this wave that is already risen. Looking at that wave, the younger wave that is following in its footsteps finds the surge of inspiration in it and surges along with the exact curvature of its ideal that it is following. By the time it has followed that ideal is already collapsing. There is this self-doubt. What? My ideal is collapsing? OMG! But then everything that is created has to collapse, but I should not stop. Charaiveti, Charaiveti, it surges again in confidence and raises up. So we see the competition between one wave and the other, comparison between one wave and the other. When the wave finally loops down, merging into the ocean, what happened to that form and the name called the wave? Waveness was perceived. In the waveness, was it ever anything other than separate from being water? If it is not anything other than separate from water, then where did the wave come from? It was our projection of Nama Rupa. Just because we have projected a Nama and Rupa to that, it does not ever, even an iota, even a small little fragment, not be water. Resolving is not about merging of the wave into the water. Is to come to the point of understanding that whether it is a small wave, big wave, tsunami, or it is merging, or it is rising, in all its states, it has ever been only water and nothing other than water. This understanding is called coming to that resolution, coming to resolve the wave into water. The final example that I would say what resolution, what resolving actually means is, this gentleman had an amazing business. So as the business rose, for his devotion on his altar, he had a nice, beautiful altar of Ram Parivar on a great, beautiful platform of Simhasana. All of this very articulately carved by the goldsmith in gold. It was so beautiful that the moment you would sit there and watch, your heart would melt looking at that entire presence of Bhagavan there, that Ram Parivar there. It was a full family photo or a full family presence. Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata, Shatrughna, Ramji and Sitaji seated, and Bharata and Shatrughna are holding the umbrella and waving the fan. Lakshmana is standing guard, and Hanumanji is sitting at the feet of Bhagavan. All of this under one umbrella. Like, there is an umbrella also, and that umbrella is nicely covering the entire spectrum of this family gathering. And it, in Hindi, it says, "Dekhte hi banta tha." Okay. But then, after certain years, because of recession, because of whatever the condition of the market and world of stocks, his business started failing. It came to that point wherein he had almost come down to bare minimum, bare bones. So with a lot of heavy heart, he started picking one by one these different parts. Now when you take that entire Ram Parivar to a goldsmith, the goldsmith does not care about the antiquity of it. When selling, he may sell it for its antiquity. When in a buyer's market, he is not going to look at it for its antiquity. He is not going to look at the pradhanyata, the greatness of that which is being represented through that name and form of that gold which is molded. So a special price for the Ram Murti, Rama Vigraha, Lakshmana Vigraha and Hanumanji and Sitaji, but the umbrella is little low, the asana is little low. No, that is not the perspective. Because his perspective is always resolved in the substratum, and that is only the perspective of Swarna. Swarnamayam eva. That everything that which is gold. Is it gold? Period. All the names and forms that the gold has been molded into, it becomes immaterial for that individual. In whichever form, whichever name, whichever format that it is expressing and functioning as, immaterial. वो सोना है तो खरीदेंगे. That is called resolving the nama rupa of that entire thing into the essence called gold. If these examples are understood, let's go back to the Shloka. Bhāvayedekamātmānaṃ nirmalākāśavatsadā. So this whole process of nididhyasana is called bhavana, visualization, born out of not shraddha but out of logical clarity. There are those who come and tell me, Swamiji, आपने बोल दिया तो होंगे हम, आत्म चैतन्य तो हो ही रह जाएंगे. आप झूठ थोड़ी ना बोलोगे. To accept something because I have a certain shraddha in that Guru Vakya or in the Shastra Vakya, therefore I accept it, period. Shraddha can be a good platform to begin, but that shraddha has to support the logical inquiry into it so that it dawns as clarity of understanding. Without that understanding, there is no bhava shuddhi. Therefore, when people say, बस एक भक्ति रह गया तो काफी है, ना, that shraddha is required. That is an initial step. But from that shraddha, we have to now move. That shraddha is like an edifice supporting that intellect now which is prepped to have this clarity of wisdom. That clarity of wisdom now has to be visualized clearly, bhava shuddhi, with bhava shuddhi. Bhāvayedekamātmānaṃ, that this entire world of nama rupa is sustained in me, the Atma Chaitanya, supported, and it is resolved unto me, into me. If this is understood, we keep asking this question, right? Swamiji, why did God create this? When you come to this standpoint of understanding and clarity, that all of this resolves into this Atma Chaitanya alone, which is nothing but Brahman. When that resolving happens, I am the Adhara, I am the Adhisthana, I am the support, I am the substratum. Into me all this merges, and from this alone that Nama Rupa is supported. Anything other than this, there has absolutely been nothing other than it. This is called seeing oneness. Anything other than, anything less than this comes nowhere close to being one with that Supreme. This, in Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan says, samatvam yoga uchyate. It is not talking about equality. Many people jump into conclusion thinking that it is talking about equality. No, we are not talking a socialistic principle. Sama means finding that oneness into which everything is resolved. Think through this. This is a very, very important, subtle point. Otherwise, many people pick this ekam atmanam nirmalākāśavatsadā bhāvayet as that samasthiti where everything is equal. Everything is equal from what standpoint? That it is all resolved in Atma Chaitanya, which is Brahma Tattva. That is called samatvam. That is, understanding it and abiding in it is called samatvam yoga uchyate. Now, when should I do it? How should I do it? How long should I do it? Very simple answer that Bhagavan Adi śaṅkarācarya ji puts, but not much, sada. Sada meaning always. I have tried this experiment. This is with respect to the physical body and our attachment to that identity. There are a lot of camps for Balavihars, for Yuva Kendra members, for adults. So in and through these camps, when we were the people that have to provide, in the ashram, I would do this experiment. Please do it with your own risk, okay? I would wake up people when they are in deep sleep, different age groups. And when they are in that groggy, woken up state, they're awake now. Not woke, but awake. So in that awakened state, when I ask the first question after waking, they're looking at me like perplexed. Why did you wake me up? Are you man or a woman? I mean, after the grumbling and ye kya question hai? For this you woke me up. And after all that, the answer is never like, wait, let me think. When I slept, I was a man. Now, during the sleep, I don't know. Now, woken up, I don't know what I have. There's no confusion, absolutely. That bhava of tadatmyata has been maintained consistently. Last week, I had given the example of the ladies carrying the pots on their head. The sense of balance is sada. If you have learnt once the cycle riding and hit the balance and you now know, even after 20, 30, 40 years, you get back onto the cycle, that is sada. Effortlessly, you are in that continuous state of being, constant state of being, sada. You get 2-3 shades of meaning of sada. Now, moving to the next shloka, the reason in 40th shloka there is a after this nididhyasana topic is done, in 39 it's maintain it, you have to reach to that level after having given that direction. From 40th to the now end of this ātmabodha, there is the mukta purusha lakshana, and this adhyatma jnana nishtha and its phala. That is vividly discussed, very beautifully discussed. So now, what does this 40th shloka talk about? This 40th shloka talks about rūpavarṇādikaṃ sarvaṃ vihāya paramārthavit paripūrṇacidānandasvarūpeṇāvatiṣṭhate. The reason I was smiling is I know several Swamijis with several names, and all of their names are here. Purnananda, Paripūrṇānanda, Chidananda, Purnacidananda, all those names are in there, and those combinations are here. So I just had a smile, brief smile for that. Now here, after the Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana is done, what is the phala of that Nididhyasana? Now pay attention here. Last week, I think it was in, I don't know, one of the sessions, whichever Devi group it was, when I was speaking, I was making a distinct clarity between Jivan Mukta and Videha Mukti. Was it this Tuesday class or was it the Thursday class? I think it was the Thursday satsang I was talking about it. So it touches about those aspects here as well. Nididhyasana is important even for that individual who is a Jivan Mukta Purusha. The Jivan Mukta Purusha, what happens? Swarupena eva avatishthaते. They are established in the self. It is like you are confident, you are very fine where you are, but if the people around you are constantly agitated and nagging, will you be at peace? Am I getting across? आप शांत चित्त हो, आप स्थिरता और धैर्य का प्रतिरूप हो. You are the very embodiment of confidence, stability, and peace. But then if the people around you, children, spouse, sister, in-laws, sometimes even parents, if they are constantly kachar nagging for everything that you do or don't, doubting, for everything that you present or don't present, they have an opinion, expect you to understand, address, and it gets to you, right? That though you are at peace, you are not left at peace, but in pieces. Am I getting across? If this example is understood, something similar is, though knowing immediately translates as being without any morphing, and the examples that Hari Chaitanya brought in are very beautiful. Even when the milk sleeps through the night and wakes up to become curd, the patra is the same, the quantity remains the same, everything looks same. But then it is not the same anymore. Lactose has now become lactobacillus. इससे ज्यादा साइंटिफिक मुझे पूछो मत. कर्डलिंग हो गया. It has become curd. Right? It was in one shape and format, it has now transformed. There is no transformation. Knowing in itself is being, which Gurudev mentions as becoming. But there is no becoming other than what you already are. Therefore, I say knowing is being. Okay, that is the state of Jivan Mukta. But then when the Nididhyasana is not given, see, there are very rare few samples, even in our last 200, 300, 400 years of recent history, maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 max in these 400 years that we would say, who had an immediate understanding as soon as the Guru pointed, and uske baad phatak. There's one Nisargadatta, maybe one Ramana Maharshi. Of the entire generations of the centuries. But there are exceptions. The rest of us will have to put that elbow grease into Nididhyasana. Why? This jnana phala of constant nature of bliss can be experienced only in that antakarana which is made this standpoint of resolving everything unto itself. If that is not done, what happens? There are these habitual erroneous perceptions of anxieties, of fears, of uncertainties that will still start plaguing you. You are Atma Chaitanya. But these instruments slip into their habitual patterns again and again and again. And where are they established? In agitation. You are in bliss, but they are in blisters. So there was this Mr. Subbarao, and fortunately or unfortunately, his neighbors, one was a blacksmith, the other was a goldsmith. Imagine this fellow in between these two houses, night and day. Tucker, constant. Frustrated with this, they finally said, you know what? I will give you money to move you to a different house. Please find a new house and move. And he gave them both the money to find a new house so that they can shift from there. So one of these days after they received that money, they both came and said, we found the house. He was happy. Subbarao was happy. So he said, okay, आज तो मैं चैन की नींद सोऊंगा. Today I will go sleep properly. No sooner that he went into that, again, sounds again. Like, what the heck is wrong? Hey, I paid you guys to go find a new house. I said, technically we did. The goldsmith came into the blacksmith's house and the blacksmith went into the goldsmith's house. Technically, the bargain was fulfilled. But the problem continues. And the only way to dissolve this problem is by this nididhyasana. Otherwise, this jnana phala will constantly be ruptured. Sukh nahi hoga usko. Am I getting across? One of the important points. So I have covered this aspect of nama rupa being resolved and how it is resolved in the earlier shloka itself. I spent enough time on it so that I could cover both shlokas. And from here on, it is the jnana phala. Why nididhyasana is a necessity to bask in that jnana phala. So we'll continue that in the next week or the weeks to come until this end of this particular book. So we'll stop here. Oh, I have already been 3 minutes over. So let's definitely stop here. If you have any questions, if you have any clarity to ask, please ping me on the group and we will answer that. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevāvasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.